Depuis plus de 15 ans, le Centre de recherche interuniversitaire sur la littérature et la culture québécoise, le CRILC, organise un cycle de rencontres annuelles avec des écrivaines et des écrivains québécois. Ces rencontres sont animées par des chercheurs et des chercheuses en littérature, aussi bien jeunes que plus aguerris, ce qui permet de mettre en dialogue les textes, les auteurs et les autrices et les savoirs. Cette année, les rencontres d'écrivains et d'écrivaines du CRILC sont consacrées à la littérature de langue anglaise au Québec, à la place qu'elle occupe dans l'espace culturel québécois. Les rencontres visent à encourager un dialogue sur les relations entre l'écriture et les institutions littéraires qui l'encadrent. Les conversations se feront en français, en anglais ou dans un mélange des deux langues. La troisième discussion de ce cycle d'entretien porte sur ce qui est en jeu pour les étudiants-étudiantes et les enseignants-enseignantes dans les programmes en création, sur le mentorat et l'alliance, sur l'industrie de l'édition, sur le travail culturel et politique de l'écriture. Nous avons invité pour cette occasion Dimitri Nasrallah, écrivain, traducteur, éditeur et professeur de création littéraire au département d'anglais à l'Université Concordia. Son premier roman, Blackbodying, a remporté le prix McCaslin du premier livre du Québec en 2005 et a été finaliste pour le Grand Prix du livre de Montréal. Il a été journaliste culturel dans de nombreux périodiques et il a été l'animateur de l'émission de télévision Between the Pages consacrée aux livres et à la culture. C'est Chloé Savoie-Bernard, autrice de 4 recueils de poésie et stagiaire postdoctorale en recherche-création à l'Université de Sherbrooke et à l'Université Concordia, qui anime cette rencontre. Comme écrivaine ou comme critique, elle collabore à différentes revues, dont Spirale, Lettre québécoise et Clin d'œil. Elle fait aussi partie du comité de la rédaction de la revue Estuaire, est éditrice de poésie chez Hexagone et traductrice littéraire.
Hi, I'm very pleased to be meeting you, Dimitri. I think it's the first time we met, even if we're meeting not in person.
But your reputation precedes you. I've heard a lot about your work, and especially with Mémoire d'Encrier, and we've been doing translations with them, right?
Yeah, I just launched a book, a translation from Tessa Mekwat, from Shame on Me. So it just has been out for like a couple of months. So yeah. But I hope
nice.
You heard good things. I heard good things about you, so.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad to whoever said that.
But just to start, I'm always a bit uncomfortable with the littérature québécoise appellation. So I just want to acknowledge that we are on stolen lands. I'm in Montreal, also called Tiotake. So I just want to begin with that, with that acknowledgement, because I'm not from here originally, or I'm not totally from here. So I want to acknowledge that, et aussi dire qu'il y a eu une longue série d'accords entre des peuples, d'accords de solidarité qui font que je peux être là maintenant, puis qu'on peut être là, en fait, maintenant pour pouvoir discuter à même nos identités, à même la littérature. So it was important for me to begin with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dimitri, I know you're doing a lot of things. You're doing translation, you teach, you write. It's a lot of things. So, and I also wanted to quote you from a paper in LQ, so it's going to be in French, when you're talking a bit about like all those kind of works you're doing. And you're saying, Montréal est une ville qui regorge d'occasions à saisir et d'obstacles à franchir, où il est préférable d'avoir plus d'une corde à son arc. Jamais je n'ai eu d'emploi à temps plein pour une durée de plus de 10 mois et j'ai fini par me sentir à l'aise dans l'espèce d'insécurité liée à la vie de pigiste qui butine d'un contrat à l'autre. Pour me faire écrivain ici, j'ai dû jouer bien d'autres rôles, étudiant de 2e cycle, agent de télémarketing, stagiaire, agent publicitaire dans le milieu de la musique, professeur d'anglais en entreprise, sous-titreur pour le cinéma et la télé, recherchiste et organisateur de projets culturels, employé de festivals musicaux, journaliste, critique, juré, professeur de littérature, animateur de télé, DJ, éditeur et traducteur. So it is a long list. And
it's practically a bio. I see my life flash before my eyes when you say that.
Is it nice or is it not nice?
It seems a lot faster when you say it. So.
Yeah, so maybe I wanted to hear you about all those jobs. And I wanted to know if there's a little fatigue coming with everything. Or is it more like stimulating to have been doing so much things? Like, yeah, just to hear you a bit.
I don't know if it's fatigue. I mean, everything comes with fatigue at some point. But I don't think that's the overall feeling. I think I moved to Montreal in 2001. because mainly for a master's degree in creative writing in Concordia, which I think we're going to talk about a little later on anyways. But my goal was to stay here because it was an artistic city, a creative city at that point. And at that point, especially, it was a very affordable city compared to what it was now. So there seemed to be a way to, live for $500 a month. And do what you want to do. And I was in my 20s at the time, and I felt like it was a good time to take that risk. So I didn't come here wanting a full-time job. I was actually trying to get away from having one so I could focus on my writing. And I think, you have this dilemma as a writer. Do you go for the security or the stability of work that's going to afford you a little more, comfort along the way? Or do you save some room for your writing, which almost thrives in this kind of discomfort zone? So I was happy enough to just use those years to just go from project to project while I tried to make something of the writing. And luckily, a lot of those projects were writing related in a way. I became very quickly the English writer in a lot of French cultural organizations. Like I worked for like Mutec Montréal, Picnic Électronique, a few organizations like that, where very quickly they said, about music and you can write in English, and everyone else here is working in French. You fit well here with this expertise in this language, and you can begin. That's how I began translating as well, and just growing a network. So it was actually quite exciting to be able to change, work on a project basis every couple of months and move from there. I don't do that so much anymore. Now I'm pretty settled as editor at Esplanade Books for Véhicule Presse, and then teaching at Concordia and my own writing. But at the time, it seemed like a good way to learn a lot of things and to meet a lot of people.
It's very interesting. And what is the link for you between music and literature? Like, where does d'où ça vient, en fait?
Oh, I don't know if it's a natural link. I've just always been obsessed with music, and had an involvement with it. I've always, been that guy who works at the record store, like collects a lot of music. And when I moved to Montreal, I got for graduate school. I was going to class like 7 hours a week, and I had a lot of insomnia because I had nothing to do, and I needed to fill my time somehow. So I began interning at a local record company, electronic music record company, and it just went from there that I got involved with these music people that way. And in a strange way, I ended up making a living off of music for like over a decade until that like really burned me out. But from like my mid-20s to my mid-30s, that was my day job, even though it was mostly like a night job than a day job. But I've always been involved in music as I like music people in a way. I like that they don't know very much about my writing life, and so I can just kind of be natural and not have to talk about those things and just, enter a different world.
And those networks you were building at that times, how were they helping you, and are they still helping you now, like creatively or more like for career-wise?
In the music, not so much. I feel like in my mid-30s, I got to a point where I had, I started to have a family. My son was born in my early 30s, and then working with music and being around at night and working all through the days on that just became kind of hectic, and I began to kind of wind it down and move more towards teaching at Concordia during the daytimes. But I think the city had like a very creative music environment, and there was a lot of very professionalized people working in music here at that time. It was like almost like a North American hub because there was this intersection between Europe and the United States. And so creatively, it was very interesting what was happening here at the time. So I still keep in touch with a lot of those people, but I don't really work with them so much anymore. Now I'm just focused mostly on writing and editing. Yeah. What about you? Where do you come into all this from? You must have a life outside of writing too that has come in parallel with this, or do you support yourself through writing the whole time?
Là, j'ai un postdoc. En fait, moi, j'ai toujours été une universitaire, c'est-à-dire que l'université a financé ma vie littéraire là, au travers des systèmes des bourses, des charges de cours. Là, c'est ça, je suis stagiaire postdoctorale, donc je suis aussi supportée par une bourse. Mon travail est supporté par des bourses. Puis ça, ça m'aide à nourrir aussi ma vie littéraire financièrement, en fait. Mais sinon, mais ça m'a intéressée, en fait, ce parcours de travail parce que j'ai toujours travaillé énormément, en fait, depuis toujours. Là, j'ai eu mon premier emploi peut-être à 15 ans. Puis depuis, j'ai juste énormément travaillé. Là. J'ai fait un peu de tout. J'ai fait aussi du sous-titrage pour la télévision. J'ai travaillé dans une station d'essence. J'ai été vendeuse. J'ai fait un peu tout et rien. Puis l'espèce de lien entre le travail, l'espèce de travail alimentaire, puis la littérature m'a toujours semblé compliqué parce que j'avais toujours l'impression de voler du temps à ma pratique littéraire. Mais ensuite, quand j'ai finalement eu mes bourses de doctorat, après la 2e ou 3e année, puis que j'ai pu justement arrêter, j'étais comme, mon Dieu, tout ce temps. Genre, j'ai toujours été à l'école à temps plein en travaillant à temps plein, puis j'essayais de réfléchir, en fait, à comment travailler quand mon temps était pas aussi serré. Puis ça m'a pris du temps avant de justement prendre la liberté, puis de me dire, j'ai plus de temps pour écrire. Mais même aujourd'hui, je veux dire, je suis au postdoctorat, j'enseigne, je suis éditrice, je veux dire, je fais énormément de choses. Puis c'est difficile aussi pour moi de pas voir qu'il y a un lien entre toute cette demande-là qu'on fait à des personnes qui sont pas blanches ou qui n'ont pas un parcours born and raised from parents who are also born and raised here, you know? Like, we have to work more and we have to be more visible to exist, I think.
Exactly. I mean, it's interesting that you made it all the way to the postdoctorate because I remember moving here for the master's degree and thinking I would continue afterwards. But once I went from my undergraduate to my master's, I thought that the demographic around me changed. All of a sudden, it was very obvious that I was like the only person of color in the classroom back then. And this was like 2001 to 2003. And the dynamic became very different. And for the first time in my education, I began to feel like alienated from the material. And it had never been that before because I'd always been like a very good student and just focused on the work. But once I got to, especially literature, once you get to like a master's degree or higher, the dynamic changes. And I wonder if you felt something of the same alienation or if that's changed in the maybe 15, 20 years between the times we went, we were doing it.
No, it didn't change at all. No, of course, but it's funny. It's not funny like ha ha ha, but it's
no, not at all.
Not at all. But it's more that I felt there were that. How can I phrase this? I felt it was hard for me being there, but a lot of times I just didn't have like the words or the like theoretical background to name how I was feeling. I was feeling alone. I always had friends, and I always have been vraiment bien entourée, mais je me sentais quand même très, très seule, en fait. Puis c'est juste un peu en vieillissant, en prenant du recul, en me rendant mieux compte des dynamiques dans le milieu universitaire, que j'ai mieux pu nommer mes émotions, puis nommer mon ressenti. Puis les violences, en fait, ou juste le sentiment d'isolement sont devenus plus clairs, puis sont devenus moins personnels aussi, tu sais, parce que I don't think it was me, Chloé Savoie-Bernard, it was the whole environment, it was structural, it was the structure that was making it hard for somebody like me to be where I was. But I was like, it's important that I'm here. Like, it's especially important because it's hard and because we have to create precedents for people that are gonna come later, you know? But no, I don't think it's something that is unique to the Anglo world or unique to the Francophone world. It's like happening, and I don't know if it's happening differently. It was my whole thought process about this interview, because sometimes I feel that we are always comparing, like, oh, the English world is so much more open than the Francophone world, and I'm like, is it true? I don't
think
know how
so.
you don't think so?
I mean, I think, in all honesty, I'd say maybe the having seen both sides, I'd say maybe at best, the English side, or the Anglo side at least, is maybe 5 years ahead, but it's the same direction at the end of the day. I think there just might be a little bit of an advancement in where the English side is at, but I think the structural differences are still there, and I still see them in my students. Like you, I mean, I may have left the pursuit of my higher education after my master's because it just felt like the air got too thin and there were too many structural challenges in the way. But I stayed working at universities after that because it was important to have a representation there, I felt. And if anyone was going to do it, I felt like if the opportunity was there, I should take it, because I'm still within a minority in the Concordia English department in terms of, visible POC presence. And I know the students notice that now. And increasingly, it's only been in the past 3 or 4 years, there have been more and more visible POC coming into the department, and they have the alienation as well. They sense it, and they're young and they don't have the language to communicate with it. And I end up having discussions with them about it, and it's important that there's someone there, right? As you were saying, to represent and to say that there is a path this way if you want to go, right?
Yeah, it's so important, and I think that sometimes the administration, they don't understand how important and how life-changing it could be for the students just to know that they're not alone. And it's not to say like we have to let go of like the quality of the teaching or the quality of the work. Like, I think we can be at the same time great intellectuals and great professors and great POC being, And sometimes it's like, ah, mais on veut pas faire de compromis sur la qualité, donc on veut pas embaucher spécialement des personnes racisées. Mais c'est comme, no, I'm excellent and I'm a BIPOC person, Both can exist at the same time. I know, hard to believe, but anyway. But I was wondering, where do you think it's coming from, like that thought that the Anglo world is more open? Because I've heard that so often. And this weekend, I was there's a queer book fair happening in Montreal, and I was hearing that from the community as well. Like, les personnes anglophones sont tellement plus ouvertes, sont tellement plus avancées, but also for the queer the queer people and the queer, I don't know, the queer environment, and also for the BIPOC environment. So I was wondering, like, where it's all coming from, this thought from us.
I mean, I don't know if it's that much more advanced, but I definitely have noticed over the years that it's a couple of years advanced along the way. And I wonder if it has to do with the fact that the French conversation about this is usually more related to Europe, whereas the English conversation is more related to what's happening in the United States or in the UK. And so there's two different discussions feeding into what Canada is, what Canadian intellectuals are debating at the end of the day. I think the only unique dynamic that Canadian intellectuals bring to the table is our relationship to Indigenous intellectuals and Indigenous history. But beyond that, I feel like a lot of our racialized debate is coming from either the United States or Europe, respectively, and that we assimilate it that way. And for that reason, I find that especially on topics of race, the Anglo communities are really following a lead that's coming from south of the border, where a lot of these issues have always been present and ever present, and a lot of the academics have been discussing them and made structural changes to the discussions. Now, that's not to say that they've resolved them in any way south of the border, and in a lot of cases they have much bigger problems than we do. But I feel that's where the reflection comes from, where we see that discussion happening and then we begin to reflect on it on our own. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a very big evolution one over the other. When we look back on it in 15, 20 years, we'll say it happened roughly around the same time, give or take a few years. But for the moment where it's happening now, that's my sense of it. I mean, do you have a sense of why there might be this disparity between the two discussions?
I don't know. I just find it interesting because I'm like, it's almost like if we have to look at you and say, oh, you're so much better than us. And it's also like an excuse not to be better at some point. Or to say, ah, ils sont tellement mieux que nous, c'est comme une défaite, comme on dit en français, là. C'est comme
Mm-hmm.
un peu une lâcheté, puis ça dirige le regard ailleurs plutôt que sur les enjeux francophones. Puis c'est aussi un peu d'effacer que les communautés anglo ont aussi des problèmes. Tu sais, comme tu dis, que peut-être elles sont un peu plus avancées, mais que rien n'est résolu, puis elles aussi ont à travailler avec différents enjeux. Mais peut-être en fait, and it's I'm wondering, like you've been through a lot of places, you've moved a lot in your life, and I was wondering what is your relation to Quebec, especially. Like, what do you think of the literary world here, but more broadly about the province? Because somewhere you were, I'm gonna quote you. I think it was in a blog, Words Outside Borders, you said, as someone who has lived in many cities all over the world, as an outsider, I constantly remind myself that no matter how much I feel at home, this sense of belonging cannot ferment without an outside to contrast it. So I found that very interesting, and I was wondering if you could talk a bit about this outside-inside look.
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll start with the Quebec literary community and go out from there since you asked me to distinguish the two. And I think going back to our previous discussion just a couple of seconds ago, I think one of the reasons that there might be this delay on the French side that maybe isn't the same on the English side is that the Quebec literary community is actually way healthier as an industry in terms in an economic sense. I feel like the Quebecois literary model, it actually works better for writers and for publishers. And so when there isn't something broken, when everything is working, people tend to not look for changes as quickly. Whereas on the English side, I feel like it's been broken for a long time and that writers don't really make much money and the system doesn't really work for anyone. So it's a lot easier for us to begin to introduce notions of change because we're looking for solutions for something that has been broken for at least, ever since, the Indigo and the chapters and the literary agents began to enter the picture in the late 90s. So absent of having adequate media or something along the lines of les libraires that you have here, or this, this very supportive, critical establishment or ways of getting books to readers, there was a lot more introspection happening on the English side earlier on because everything looked like it was already kind of broken to begin with. So, if anything, I look over at the Quebec literary economic model and I see something almost to aspire to in a way. I think it's in terms of its borders, its dimensions, the way it communicates from writer to editor to critic to bookseller and finally to audience. There's a very smooth transition there that happens in a natural way that we just don't see on the English side. So I feel very much at home in the Quebec literary model and as a Montrealer. And I've been in Quebec for 20 years now, so I feel like no matter how much I find myself outside of the larger Quebecois societal debates, I'm way more outside the ones in Ontario or even say Alberta or places like that I just feel completely foreign in. And of course, I'm implicated in Quebecois social debate at this point. When we talk about, a Bill 21, I feel that is something that's really speaking at me directly in a way, right? I can't excuse myself from that type of conversation. So I, increasingly, I feel that I am, comfortable within Quebecois society because, I have a family here. I have my son goes to a French school here. I'm involved in society in a way that just the average person, or I'm like my neighbors that way. So we all have something in common. So I don't know. Maybe it's a process of time. I'm in my mid-40s now, so I feel that it's. I've been on the outside for a very long time, I guess, because I began my life that way and I moved around a lot of ways. And so now it feels a little more settled. That's just a lot of information. I don't know if any of it is like making sense or
No,
resonating.
totally.
So,
No,
yeah.
in fact, I was also wondering because I saw an interview you did, I think, in 2018, Rature et Lit. It was in French. It was like on YouTube, a YouTube video. And you were
Yeah, I remember
labeled
that.
as, you remember it? Okay. And you were labeled as an écrivain migrant. Like, and I was wondering, I was like, does it feel right? And what do you think about this kind of labels? Because sometimes I like all labels, it could be useful, but in the same time, it could be hurtful. Like to be always labeled as un écrivain migrant, because when we say that, are we really thinking about how the books are made, about all the aesthetics in the book, or are we just thinking about like the thematic? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, right? Because
Hmm.
the labels come from everywhere. And I don't know if you feel this too, but I think, over a lifetime of being labeled, being mislabeled, after a while, you develop a kind of callous to labels. Like my knee-jerk reaction is to just ignore them half the time when people are talking. And maybe that's a bad reaction, to be the guy who just keeps on smiling through it and doesn't engage in the conversation about the label and just gets to the question. But I feel like that's kind of what's happened to me over the past couple of years. And if anything, I try to use that platform to kind of circle back to important questions and raise issues wherever possible. Now, I think in that instance, it may have been just a matter of what the show was about. And certainly, you can't look at my books and not think that migration isn't like the major theme of them. So I can understand where people are coming from with that label, but like you, I don't know if I'm always 100% comfortable with the label. I mean, I also don't feel comfortable being called like an Anglophone writer either,
Hmm.
that's almost even more uncomfortable because it brings this colonialist history onto it and makes it seem like I was buying property in Westmount in the early
Ah oui.
20th century and that my grandparents are factory owners or something like that. But so I don't ascribe to that history at all either. So I'm left with this situation, whereas I don't label very easily. Do you find that you label easily? Do you want to label at all, or how would you prefer that people talk about your work when it arrives to that point? Because at a certain point you get attention and people begin to talk, and that's where the shorthand comes up, right?
Um, yeah, but I can answer to that, but I wish I could answer you more questions about what you were saying. Because I would like, what are the questions you would like to be asked? Si tu veux pas être un écrivain anglophone, quel type d'écrivain, comment tu voudrais qu'on te décrive alors?
Oh, that's a big question. I guess, I mean, I would look at I'd look at the history of the work of what I've done as how I would like to be seen, right? So the fiction I've edited as an editor, the work I've put out, and most people are quite good about that. It's only really when you approach people who have just taken a very quick way about doing their research that these labels begin to come out, and they ask you to speak to certain things. I remember when there was, for example, the August 5th, 2020, the Beirut blast. that was in the media. And I remember being devastated by it, like a lot of other people were. But all of a sudden, 3 hours later, the CBC, or Radio-Canada actually, sends me an email wanting artists from the Lebanese diaspora to comment on it. And so then 2 hours after that, they showed up at my house, and I was still very much in shock about the situation. And they just wanted everything to be in that shorthand. They wanted me to pull out any Lebanese artifacts I may have had, to speak about Lebanese stories. They wanted to film it all in 2 minutes, get as many visuals in there that would work. And that's the kind of situation that's like offensive to me, right? Because it's taking just one very small thread of an identity and magnifying it for a very quick presentation. It's not even trying to probe it in depth, right? It's minimizing everything else in order to showcase that one thing. And I felt rather dirty by the time that was done, and I regretted doing the interview after that. And I said, next time this happens, I won't do an interview of that nature. But I think at this point, and maybe this speaks to your question, and I'm coming around to it, I try to avoid being put in those situations altogether now. So if I feel that an interview or some kind of recognition is going to fall along those lines of minimization, I'm okay with saying no to that before it even starts now. And just selecting those situations where I feel like we can get a little more in depth and have like a conversation that goes in many directions. Like when they told me, for example, that, you were going to be hosting this and we were going to be talking for an hour, that seemed like an opportunity to have like a conversation that goes in a number of different directions. Knowing something about your work, I understood that, you wouldn't be the type of person to do that kind of minimization to the discussion. And I felt like that could be a rewarding conversation to have. So I think maybe the answer comes down to not involving myself in situations where I feel that minimization could happen.
It's the power of the no, isn't it? Like there's a power in saying no.
Exactly. And I think it's very hard for a younger artist to be able to say that. I know I had a lot of difficulty with that over the years, and I found myself in many uncomfortable situations as a result. And then after a certain point, I was just like, it's really just all going to end up as clickbait on the internet anyways. So I might as well just do something I enjoy. And if it means me being quiet sometimes, that's okay too. I mean, do you find it difficult to say no to everything? I see you. I mean, your name is out there a lot. You're very involved in the scene. But does that come with a kind of obligation on your part? Do you feel like you can't step back even if the situation's a little uncomfortable?
It depends. In fact, like when my grants were over when I was doing my doc, I had no choice to say yes to a lot of things because I had to pay my rent. I had to do things like just to eat and like to be alive, So this was harder. Now, like it's also because I feel so precarious. Like, yes, I have the postdoc, and yes, like for right now, I don't have any problem like living pour gagner ma vie, en fait. Mais je sens que c'est précaire. Comme je sais pas qu'est-ce qui va arriver par la suite, je pense que pour moi, une personne comme moi, obtenir un poste à l'université va être plus compliqué parce que tout a toujours été plus compliqué pour une personne comme moi. Si j'ai à comparer avec mes amis qui avaient des parents qui avaient pu payer leurs études ou, tu sais, je veux dire, tout a toujours été plus compliqué. Donc, je sens que je dois dire oui pour me protéger puis pour protéger mon avenir. Je pense que, puis, c'est le privilège des gens qui sont pas précaires parfois de pouvoir dire non. Puis c'est à ça que je pense souvent, tu sais. Puis, ces temps-ci, j'ai beaucoup de difficultés parce que j'ai l'impression que l'expertise que j'ai gagnée en travaillant dans autant de domaines est souvent utilisée dans des projets qui sont pas les miens, puis où j'agis comme consultante, ou j'édite, ou je fais ci, ou je fais ça. Puis à la fin, ces projets gagnent en visibilité, gagnent des prix, gagnent beaucoup d'argent. Moi, j'ai été payée un salaire souvent dérisoire pour participer à ces projets-là. Mais quand il s'agit de mes projets, j'ai l'impression parfois que c'est plus difficile, que les critiques sont plus négatives, que les choses sont juste plus difficiles à gagner, à être visibles parce que c'est moi qui les signe, tu sais. Puis maintenant, j'essaie un peu de réfléchir à ça, puis je me dis, est-ce que je peux continuer à être consultante? Est-ce que je peux continuer à avoir ces rôles-là à des salaires aussi dérisoires pour que les gens obtiennent autant de visibilité un peu avec mon travail. Je sais pas si c'est clair. Fait que je pense qu'il faut que je développe mieux mon nom pour ce type de choses-là, puis que je me pose plus la question de qui bénéficie de ça, parce que j'ai souvent l'impression que mon travail ne bénéficie pas à moi, puis ça, je commence à trouver ça un peu difficile, en fait. And I was, when your BIPOC students or your students in general are asking you advice about things, are you telling them about how to say no, or are you like giving them an indication about the literary words, or are you more focusing about how they write? I was wondering about that.
Well, I think in class it's about more how they write and
Mm-hmm.
everything, and being true to the experience. But inevitably, what I end up finding is because when I went to school, I was the only one in my class, and it felt like I'd almost walked in by mistake, and that I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have been there, and that everyone else who looked like me went to medical school or law school or something that their parents really advised them to do, and I had taken a wrong turn somewhere. Now there's maybe 3 or 4 per class that I see, and what I notice is that they change the nature of the discussion by being there, but it's still a lot more of a burden on them than it is on the
Mm-hmm.
other students. And it's a lot easier for them to become disillusioned with the whole process. And so the conversations that we do end up having inevitably come back to how do you fight disillusionment?
Mm-hmm.
How do you continue on this path and not feel as though you've given too much of yourself to the process, or that people are not only looking at identity for you, whereas everyone else gets a pass to be a little more complex than that. There's this constant pressure to be visible and to fit into a particular definition of how things are. And as you just said yourself earlier, that's it's very difficult to walk away from that, because it is a precarious situation, and I think this is the thing that people don't realize. In that, when you have a creative who is POC and a creative who is not POC, and they both occupy the same public space, that doesn't mean they come from the same circumstances or
Mm-hmm.
that they're going in the same direction at all. I mean, the circumstances are completely different, and so the ideology feeding into it is completely different, and especially the thought process around money is completely different. And what stabilizes security. I mean, if you've come from like a stable family situation that goes back generations, and that your family will always be there to comfort you and to provide you with some welfare, that's a different dynamic than if you've largely been on your own in a lot of scenarios with no ideological support or even financial support to get there, right? That's two different mindsets. And so that's the part that I find a lot of people don't talk about, because it ends up sounding like you're complaining in a way to do that, to be afforded this space and to begin to talk about how precarious it is to occupy this space. And so it puts creatives who are in a POC situation in this kind of catch-22 where you can't really win in a way, right? So you need the visibility, but it comes with this fatigue. But if you say anything about the fatigue, then you're discrediting your own visibility. And you end up running this weird, very exhausting circle. At least that's my view of it. I mean, do you see that happening on the French side too? Are people having this conversation?
Oh my God, what you're saying, it's music to my ear. It's a sad music, but it's still music, and I relate. I relate a lot, in fact, and because on parle pas beaucoup en français, j'ai l'impression de l'héritage, de comment l'héritage entre les générations permet à beaucoup d'artistes de mener les carrières qu'ils et elles ont, en fait. Puis beaucoup de gens, puis même ne serait-ce que juste payer les études, juste ne pas finir ses études avec des dettes importantes, ou payer une maison, ou aider à payer des maisons. Tu sais, tout ça, en fait, comme c'est très, très important, ça arrive constamment. C'est pas mal, je dis pas aux gens de se sentir coupables si c'est leur cas, mais juste de dire, on ne vit pas de la même façon. Si moi, j'occupe tous ces espaces-là, c'est pas parce que je veux être visible plus que tout, c'est parce que je n'ai pas le choix. Je n'ai pas le choix, puis cette visibilité souvent me heurte, là. Parfois, je me retrouve au milieu de situations vraiment compliquées ou si j'énonce... tu sais, il est arrivé tellement de choses cette année, en fait, de situations racistes, de situations où moi, j'ai prouvé un racisme. Puis je me dis, est-ce que je le dis? Est-ce que je le dis publiquement? Si je le dis publiquement, I'm gonna be again labeled as a woke, la la la, and I don't want to be like in that label forever because I want to discuss about what I'm writing. I'm a writer, and so it's really hard. It is really hard, and sometimes I know that some young people are looking up for me because I'm one of the only one, and I don't want to tell them it's really, really hard, but it's just getting harder and harder. The more I'm getting like visible, it's harder. Genre, le plus je suis visible, le plus c'est difficile, en fait, parce que, ouais, pis ça, je trouve ça très compliqué. Puis j'essaie souvent, ces temps-ci, j'essaie de réfléchir au repos, comme qu'est-ce que ce serait me reposer, comme comment continuer à aimer la littérature, parce que si je suis en littérature, c'est parce que c'est la chose que j'aime le plus au monde. Mais comment continuer à trouver cette joie-là, comment conserver intact mon amour de la littérature alors que le contexte est très, très difficile, en fait. And you know, with all the debate about the N-word, all of those things, with people who were talking were my colleagues, were people that was working in different areas. And I was like, how I'm going to be able to just work with them when I know how they think. But they think that, oh, I'm not really into that, or I'm not Black enough, or Chloé's not, you know? So this was really, really hard, in fact. And I keep trying to find softness and to find joy, but it's not so easy. But how do you rest, Dimitri?
Well, that's a big question. I think part of it is making more connections among POC creatives. I feel strongly that, and this is the part that people push back against, but I do feel that it's important for us not to be standing individually, that we need to stand together and create our own networks so we have our own standards. Because right now I feel that we're still operating by larger structural standards that have been in place for generations that aren't there to serve us in the same way. And I feel that the more we make connections between each other, the more stability we will have. I began to find this change when I was quite lucky to be offered to become editor at Esplanade Books. And that was a big change because no one was really thinking of it at the time. All of a sudden, there's a POC person here as an editor, but that's what it was in the end, and it gave me the confidence to start making different decisions after a while. At first, I thought I should continue with the same decisions that everyone was making before that, but then after a while, I just got tired with perpetuating this idea of what literature should be. And I was like, no, someone took the confidence to put me in this position, and I'm going to have the confidence to actually create a network if possible and make room because if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it at this point. So to begin working with people like Kai Kello or Tahida Tanya Evanson or Bahran Bani Ahmadi or all these different writers who are really just would have a different way in. We wouldn't be together in a way, to create this community where we could all be in the same space and have this fortitude in numbers. I think Mémoire d'Encrier does incredible work in the French community in that respect and creating that space. But I do think all the other publishing houses, unfortunately, are leaving all the work to Mémoire d'Encrier at this point and not really taking on any of that responsibility themselves. So I feel like you need to bring in not only writers, but you need to bring in people who work at the publishing house. You need to bring in people who teach at the university. You need to bring in editors. Give POC roles of responsibility that go beyond simply being the figurehead that has no stability, but become part of the structural fabric of the operation. And the more that happens, I think that's where we'll begin to see some real change. Because if you're sending out your manuscript to 10 publishing houses, and all of a sudden 5 of them have editors who are more diverse than they used to be in the past. It changes the nature of return completely. It becomes a different game altogether. I'm wondering, do you see that change happening on the French side in terms of people of different backgrounds being brought in, not simply on the level of being the writer, but also, working at the publishing houses, or, getting the promotions at the university level into positions where they can have some say over what happens?
Oui, ben c'est sûr que Mémoire d'Encrier fait un travail historique, en fait. Je pense que sa présence dans le paysage québécois a changé de nombreuses choses. Aussi avec le travail qu'ils font en édition, de publier la littérature autochtone, des littératures autochtones. Donc, vraiment profondément, oui, ça a changé les choses, mais je suis moins d'accord avec toi quand tu dis que que c'est pas mal la seule structure, parce qu'il y a d'autres structures qui sont différentes, mais qui font un super travail. Je pense entre autres à Stéphane Martelly, qui a sa collection Les
Ah oui,
Martiales. Les Martiales, c'est extraordinaire, là, les livres qu'elle publie là.
and
Il y a
that's very
aussi...
new too, right?
It's very, very new. They published 3
Yeah.
books. I know there is more to come, but for now it's only 3 books. But there is also Triptych, who historically has published a lot of books from BIPOC persons like Joël Desrosiers. Ils ont publié aussi le livre de Stéphane Martelly, mais présentement, il y a Nicolas Dawson aussi qui travaille à plusieurs collections. Puis, mais c'est juste que j'ai l'impression que ça reste encore fragile, ces espaces-là. Puis, c'est pas parce que ils existent, ces espaces-là, plutôt qu'ils vont exister pour toujours. Donc, je pense qu'il faut continuer à les multiplier, puis c'est vraiment, vraiment important. Mais voilà. Mais je me demandais, en fait, comment tu décrirais la relation que tu as avec tes écrivains, tes écrivaines, comment en tant qu'éditeur, je veux dire, comment tu développes ces relations-là avec eux, puis comment tu les travailles, puis comment tu les espères aussi. What do you wish those relationships would be with your writers?
Oh, well, I mean, I think most of the ones that I end up working with, I actually actively go seek out.
Mm-hmm.
They're people who are already doing very interesting things. They're doing the hard work, maybe, of being visible when it's precarious to do so, and quite exhausting to do so. And I go look for them and start conversations and figure out what they're working on. And after that, I think it's a matter of giving people the space to let their imaginations go where they want them to go, and not to try to put any structure on it. I make a distinction between like being a prescriptive editor who says a book should look a certain way, and a descriptive one who says, oh, okay, this is where your expression wants to go. Let's see how we can finesse that and make it bring out the fullest potential of what you're trying to do. So I think a lot of it comes down to respecting the person who's doing the writing, and respecting the fact that I may not be familiar with the background that they're bringing to the table. And so I should make sure that I'm not working with assumptions, because I felt a lot of people, especially early on, who were working with me worked with assumptions. And I'm talking about the editors who I first began working with, and the people who first saw me when I was emerging, were working with a lot of assumptions that I often felt uncomfortable with. And that's the part I don't want to perpetuate and to continue. This sense that a person who is going to work on a book with me has to feel that they have to bend themselves, their personality or their identity, in order to fit a model that's going to become an opportunity for them. I think they're the opportunity. I'm the one who needs to bend and to create the space. And because I think ultimately the structure should bend around the artist, right? And I think this is a problem we've been discussing all the time. No one wants to take responsibility for the structure not bending and becoming more accommodating. So ultimately, I like to, in as much as possible, bend that structure to a point where the writer feels worthy and respected, and that they ultimately feel good about their work.
I don't know if I'm being too simple here, but do you think that the major thing we're lacking is respect?
I don't think that's being too simple. No, I mean, respect takes on many different layers. No, I think people, and I find this is the interesting thing with respect. People can be respectful situationally, but not structurally, if that makes sense.
Yes.
In a way, so you can be talking to someone on an individual level, and you can both be quite nice to each other, but if one person is being held down a little bit by the structure of the situation and the other one feels they have no control over changing that, then there's an imbalance there. You're not going to have true respect. You're having respect in terms of one part of the equation, but not in terms of the other part of the equation. So I think this is ultimately what a lot of the comments and what gets dismissed as wokeness is coming from right now, and that what we're trying to do is not destroy what came before, but simply say it hasn't been equal in terms of how someone arrives to certain levels and how they're able to maintain that. And it's important to be very specific about where these inequalities are so we can change them in the details. And, that's not going to happen immediately, but maybe it's our responsibility in terms of being in this generation where this change is taking place to take that. But that brings us back to this catch-22 of fatigue and burnout, and how much do you take on yourself, right? So there's no perfect answer for it, I'm afraid, as far as I can see. Do you see, how much disrespect do you see, and do you see a solution to that question of respect?
Oh my God, there's so much disrespect. Yes, it's a day where I'm especially tired because there's a big polemic right now around my translation
Oh no.
of Tessa Mekwat. Yeah, and I haven't said anything really about it on social media, let's say, but it's really, really hard and it's really, really taxing. And people have been calling that critic racist, that review racist. So for me, it's really hard right now. In fact, today
Oh, I'm
especially.
sorry.
So I am, but if I'm just taking that example, I think it's very possible to critique books, to make bad review, but I think the most important thing is respect and to be fully aware of what you're doing and why you're doing, and of the person you're talking of. And there I feel there's a lot of disrespect, and I see like the whole my whole literary environment taking sides, and I'm just petrified because I'm like, if I'm talking, am I going to like suicide myself in the literary world? Like, I feel I cannot talk, and this is very, very hard and this is where I feel there is no freedom for someone like me. I don't have that freedom of speech that everybody is afraid to lose. I don't have it. So I find it's very, very hard. But this is my little story. But I think my little story is not only my own. I think it's structural. I see it like in the big scheme of things. So I think we have to be careful about the way we talk about each other, and just to be aware, like for myself, that I've been working very hard for a very long time. So maybe if my translation is not perfect, maybe it's because it's just my first translation, but I'm also an academic and I also have worked in the publishing world for years and years and years. So just like say that, just like be aware of where I'm coming from and from all my work. I'm not just like, you know? So I think it's really, really hard for someone like me to be in that world. But what is giving me hope is that people are, when it was out, it was just out, the review was like, oh my God, am I going to be alone, just suffering in my office, like crying my heart off? And the day passed, and I was aware that a lot of people were behind me. Not a lot of people, a lot of people were saying it like publicly, but also a lot of people were afraid to say things publicly, but were writing to me, in my inbox, in my like phone calling me. And I was like, okay, I'm not alone. Like, we're a community of people that are noticing some things that we're just saying no to. But I don't know if things are going to change because we are saying those things publicly. But let's hope. And I'm trying to be hopeful. Sometimes it's very hard, but yeah, I don't know, if I have a kid and that kid wants to write and that kid looks like me, I want that kid to have a better literary life that I had. So I'm sorry, I am too depressive.
No, I think you bring up something like very, I mean, I can totally connect with that. I remember feeling that way when I was working on the translations I did of Éric Plamondon's
Yeah.
trilogy, the 1984 trilogy. And it almost felt like it's like breaking into a circle in a particular way. And there's no, the structural problem with this whole situation is that you're not. It either has to be perfection or failure. At the end of the day, there are these nuances that can happen where someone can bring a different texture to a translation, aren't quite understood, and unfortunately, you begin to see people for their true colors in a way. If someone's going to use their review space, for example, to make those comments, then they've revealed themselves in a way. And I think there is something to be said about your work creating that reaction and revealing that person who wrote that review or that criticism for who they are. Because, you see it and you feel it, but everyone else sees it at the same time. And I think that person has done more damage to them than they have to you. Or at least in the long view, I hope that's what the situation is. And I think people, are going to have more awareness of this. I think that the thing that makes me feel more optimistic, and I know it's hard to feel optimistic in this situation, is when, as an editor, I see the sales numbers that come in for a Kai Keller, a Tahita Tanya Evanson, and they're so much higher than non-POC writers. And that's not because all of a sudden all the regular literary audience has gathered around these voices because they're so diverse. It's because they're speaking to people who've never bought these books before. And there's an entirely new audience that's being spoken to. All of a sudden. And that's the interesting part about the transition, is that the audience of POC readers and POC intellectuals who we don't see and hear has grown so much since waves of immigration have really begun to bring those families here in the 90s and early 2000s. You're seeing the children of immigrants now, or the children of immigrants, begin to rise up to these levels and have these voices and bring these perspectives. And that's ultimately what's going to change the marketplace, in that these people are going to buy these books in greater numbers than the older generations bought those older books in a way. And hopefully that's where the change really is. And, I would hope that your kid one day looks back at your translations and sees not a shitty review that someone wrote, but says that, this is really pioneering work, and thank you for, taking on that burden. And really doing what no one else had done in that space before. And hopefully that's the way it comes across to people.
This is so nice of you to saying all those things. It's therapy. It's not a podcast. But
it's going to make for more interest. People are hearing us. This is what we want to talk about, though, right?
Yeah.
This is, if we're given the space, this is what people should hear.
Thank you. But je pense que c'est un peu la fin de notre entrevue sur ces grandes paroles. Mais peut-être en terminant, peut-être pour revenir un peu dans un moment un peu moins émotif, toi aussi t'es traduit. Like you've been translated by Daniel Grenier, and how would you describe that experience? Like, because you're a translator and then you're translated. So how is this? How are you negotiating this?
I mean, I think what I do, especially with the first one that would happen, Nico, I didn't even really give it too much of a look. I left it between Mylène Bouchard and Daniel Grenier, the editor at La Peuplade and the translator, to figure out. And I left them to their expertise. So, I mean, I found in my situation, it's better for the author to not really interject themselves too much into the work of the translation, because the translator is moving something from one culture to another. So if they have questions, they can approach me. But it becomes very uncomfortable once you start to like micromanage the process. And I don't know, maybe you've seen that with certain translations. It doesn't make the translation any better if the translator doesn't have the space to really bring their vision to the table, right? So I'm of the position that a translator should be left to do their work, and the best you can manage is to have the author's perspective and the translator's language kind of fused together in a way that is somewhat cohesive.
Sa traduction de Nico est excellente. Là. J'ai adoré lire. Je l'ai lu juste en français, en fait, puis c'était excellent. Mais voilà, Dimitri Nasrallah, je pense que c'est la fin de notre conversation. Je voulais te remercier pour ta grande générosité. You really have been really, really generous, so thank you. So that's it. Thank you, de Krilk.
Yes, thank you.
Merci d'avoir écouté cet entretien avec Dimitri Nasrallah et Chloé Savoie-Bernard. Un entretien réalisé en collaboration avec Magnéto et qui s'est enregistré virtuellement dans le respect des consignes de distanciation sociale. Pour découvrir d'autres auteurs et autrices, retrouvez tous les épisodes des rencontres d'écrivains et d'écrivaines du CRILC sur votre application balado préférée.